camera. Choose the 1080 Pro Stream.
Bam. We are live.
Oh, we should move the camera a little bit there. Look at
Technical difficulties.
that. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Max and Ben Save the World, Men's Mental Health Podcast. We're glad you're here today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. So we'd like to take this moment to mention that even though we are both therapists, this podcast is not our replacement for therapy. We recommend you go to therapy instead. So, yep, there's definitely resources like the 988 Suicide Prevention Lifeline if you're ever, worried about your safety. And, yeah, you can use Psychology Today to find a therapist near you. So, today's topic will be how to be a good man in a holistic sense, or just kind of in the whole.
How to be a healthy
way.
man.
How to be a healthy man.
Yeah.
Yes. So our recognition today is going to go to Z et al., Z and colleagues, who recently completed some research on prostate cancer that is going to target some particular enzymes to inhibit the growth of prostate cancer, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah, so check that out. You said Z et al. Like Z-I?
XIE.
XIE et al. Has new research about prostate cancer.
You could look up the story on Good News.
On Good News.
The Good News website.
The Good News
I
whole
can't remember what exactly
Easy
it was
to
called.
remember.
But
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying the website was called Good News.
It's like Good
website.
News. It was like goodnews.com or something.
Oh,
like
hell
that.
yeah.
I was
What
like,
a-
yeah, that was a positive.
Shout out goodnews.com. Your name
for
is great.
existing.
Yeah. Very cool.
So, I feel like we've been spending this season talking about how to be a physically healthy man, mentally healthy, spiritually healthy, socially healthy. And so we're just thinking about how to put this all together, and then also how to just kind of be a good man
Yeah.
in a whole sense. And I feel compelled to start this conversation off with what is a good man?
Yeah.
Is really a question that I kind of want to ask, because I feel like that's sort of where we're at after 4 episodes of talking about it.
Yeah. I think that it's an interesting question. To me, I just want to get out of the way. I think that this, combined with I know what I'm bringing up later, might feel like some parts of this conversation I think are going to get more into that, like, your friend's older brother's with conspiracy theories and the mushroom posters in the basement kind of conversation about, like, man, what even is it to be a man and stuff. But I think that it's a worthwhile question to look inwardly about when we ask ourselves, do I think that I'm healthy? Right? And, like, breaking apart, like, what even is health? Is that what society tells me is healthy? Is that, like, naming who that little voice is that's inside your head that what gives shape to those words as they come into your brain, and you think to yourself as you answer those questions about, am I healthy? Should I be doing something or not? I think what's crazy is that there's a whole level of health wrapped up in that, in asking ourselves, am I an accurate measurement of my own self? Is a deeply profound question if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of men want to live a congruent life that's,
Yeah.
congruent like with their values and what they think. And I do think that we used to be kind of in a society where there was sort of a monoculture, in my opinion, where everyone sort of had the same values, and we're kind of in this space of everyone sort of has different values. Everyone is, has different communities online that they're a part of, different communities in person. There's so many different activities and communities that you can be a part of now, rather than just kind of like one, assumed community. And I think that the world is having kind of a crisis about that.
Yeah,
if I
it's
do
that
say
internet boom changing
Yeah.
all of the places and ways that we connect.
Yeah, and I think that men, especially, are struggling to find their place there, and knowing where's the best place to land in a way that's actually healthy for myself and for everyone else.
Yeah.
So I do think that, what is a good man? I mean, I think that, you could almost ask, what is the meaning of life,
Yeah.
Is it something that you, sort of define yourself? And I think that there's a lot of different definitions of, what is good out there.
I think it's something that we should view like a rock or like a glacier and maybe pick apart at a little bit as we talk through the podcast. Because I feel like for me, what's coming up is almost I want to quote somebody, but I also want to heavily lay out and just because I mention somebody's name and I use something that they say does not mean that I agree politically or ideologically with everything that they have to say. But I heard a very profound piece of information from Jordan B. Peterson. You knew who was coming.
I knew it.
And the guy that talks like Kermit and tells you to clean your room. But he also, I think, had a very interesting way of viewing decision making. And particularly a lot of his messaging is for young men. And so he kind of lays out in a couple of ways. I've seen him lay out this presupposition that when encountering a problem or making a major decision in life or minor decision, what have you, is asking whether or not the choice that you're making is going to be beneficial for you and your family, your closest, the people that you interact with on a daily basis, right now, and in the near future. So say that is a few months or a few weeks or a year away, and then in the far future. And those three, being an uneven number, will typically tell you, if this is going to be good right now and good in the far future, but it's going to suck in the medium term, going back to school to get an advanced degree might feel good right now, might really suck while you're in the middle of it, and then in your far future, you're going to thank yourself for having advanced your education. Like would be an example where only two of those pieces are congruent, but the majority are saying something. And I think that picking apart what is it to be healthy and what is it to what does it mean to be a good man, to be a healthy man, to be all of these things is something that you just can't answer, like the meaning of life in a simple phrase. But I think taking and applying the ways that other people have thought about the question can really help us attack for our own selves whatever meaning we need to take away from that. Because ultimately the thought experiment is not one that you're ever going to solve. It's only one that you're going to wrestle with and then hopefully walk away better for the experience.
And, I do think that sometimes men and boys look up to people like Jordan Peterson, whether you like everything that he's done in his career or not, and say, I think I like what he said. Yeah. I think that is what a man is. Yeah. I read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and I think that is what a man is. Yeah. I read, Richard Reeves of Boys and Men, and
Machiavelli's
I think that
The Prince.
Got an idea of what a man is. Mm-hmm. So I guess to me, kind of my conclusion, and what I'm thinking after you shared that about Jordan Peterson and your thoughts there, is that your idols are really an important part of deciding, what a good man is, which then I think gets kind of mixed up with, our season 2, hero's journey sort of conversations where, you kind of earn being a hero, you earn being a man, in some regards, the idea of precarious manhood coming in there, and then everyone else looks at you and be like, wow, that's so cool. I wish I could do that. And then there's this kind of that inspiration of that person is a man because they achieved that.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of interesting.
Well, I think our tendency as animals, as social animals, to want to find other men that we can look towards for guidance and example is by its very nature a preservative factor of our species. It's something that obviously was beneficial to us. The idea of fatherhood, I feel like, you know, it could be a whole series of the podcast. We don't need to break apart the whole thing. I think we can both just generally agree fatherhood, pretty good idea for the species. Like having your dad
being
around.
An active dad.
Being an active dad.
I was like, Ben, are you talking about just having sex? Or are you
No,
talking
no.
about being there for the child?
Being there for the child. Yeah. Generally seems to come with better results. And so just rudimentarily extrapolating from that, like, yeah, it's probably beneficial for us to look at who are we choosing to be the people that we look up to. Because ultimately, and I think a lot of the sad reality of our harsh and brutal world is that we don't always get to pick who those idols are, especially early in life.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily get to choose when we find out that human beings are fallible and that our heroes aren't always exactly the paragons of whatever virtues they tend to espouse. And so I think that, you know, I don't think it's a wonderful, unique perspective that I have, but as somebody who lost their father early in life, I think that I have the perspective that comes from that allows me to say, as an individual, each of us have an incredible capacity to examine who and what we want our idea of the ideal or image of the father figure or what fatherhood is and means to be. We have a profound ability to simply tell ourselves what we're going to listen to and what we're not. And I think that that's actually, as I just keep going, as I dig further into this, I don't want to man shakes fist at clouds too much at the internet this early in the podcast.
Just do it.
But here I go. I think we're outsourcing that individual work that's a little bit scary of examining. Maybe my dad wasn't exactly the guy that he always said that he was, and if I live out these ideals perfectly and exactly, I'll notice the hypocrisy inherent in all sorts of father figures, you know, teachers, coaches, things like that throughout my life. And instead of doing the work of internalizing what parts will I keep and what parts will I throw away, we're turning to our online spaces on the internet and saying, tell me, replace that for
my
me.
work.
Replace my work for me.
Well, I think that then we run into social media kind of in this place of they want to feed you information 24/7. They make more money when you're spending more time on the app, so they're continuously trying to put your brain in a passive mode rather than active mode and trying to do their own thing. I want to acknowledge there's a comment in the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let me pull that up after you're done. But
this is not a rerun. Okay, yeah.
Oh, I think I had it labeled as a rerun.
Yeah,
before.
Yep, and so he's criticizing Jordan Peterson in the tech. Truly ironic they're talking about Jordan Peterson while discussing society today. Meanwhile, Jordan's daughter going on yacht parties with Andrew Tate himself.
Yeah,
real.
Real. I think that, I mean, I won't bear my full fangs here, but I think Jordan Peterson is more than a bit of a grifter. I think it's fair to say that there's a whole racket that's been established in the moving from a place of coming from educational authority to then espousing these ideals or this kind of lifestyle coaching that comes from science in order to further a whole bunch of problematic beliefs around women and minorities. And I think it's unfortunate that rather than solving the inherent problem that produced the result of him having a bunch of young men looking for a father figure online, finding him, rather than bucking up and being a good dad, he decided to further a political agenda around that and to further his career and to get book deals and to go on tours and things like that. And I think that is morally reprehensible. That's my
Yeah,
very polite version of that.
I think that a lot of people really don't like Andrew Tate these days, and I think that you would find that.
Thank you.
There's a lot of people who agree with that sentiment.
Yeah.
I think that he started out his career in a situation where he was, putting some information out there, and people really identified with it, but it was really a lot of basic self-help stuff. And then he kind of went off the deep end, and things really, kind of went south a little bit. I think for him and for his reputation, kind of professionally, but people still seem to like him. And so, on this podcast, I really do think it's important that we kind of acknowledge like some of these dialogues.
Yeah.
I think about Jordan Peterson, and I think about so a lot of the things he's done, he kind of suck. Okay, but is there something that we can glean from what he said that's like, okay, this is at least information that we can use to try and make men better, even if he as a person is not great.
Not doing so great with it. I mean, I think that one of the kinder interpretations of his works that I could give is that he is a man that legitimately became educated enough in the fields of literature and storytelling as well as psychology in order to notice some compelling patterns in ways that forwarded particularly narrative therapy techniques. I don't think that you can deny that 20 years from now, assuming he doesn't completely tank his career with what he's doing politically, he's had some decent ideas. He's a well-educated man.
Well, I think the issue with today is that
You don't
some
know.
some people he's tanked his career. Other people he is at the top of his career.
Exactly.
And that's kind of our divergence today.
I think though that to get a little bit of not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but I think that the intention of wanting to bring up some things like that though is that I think that we're entering into this arena where it's possible that we are encountering a lot of the same people feeling the same kind of way. And I think that by getting out in front of ourselves and in front of our audience first and saying, one of our missions, one of our goals, one of our values is to share that you should question authority. You should question us. If you're listening to this podcast, everything that we're saying is not always correct all of the time.
I have a PhD, but I'm not in charge.
Yeah, my master's degree is in counseling, and that's it. I don't know everything, and even in education, I think a lot of people find as they go further into education has all sorts of other factors that go into it that prioritize certain opinions, certain beliefs, certain things in such a way that, man, you got to do what feels right for yourself. And you got to do what feels right for the people around you.
Yeah, and I do want to acknowledge...
Yeah, and we still got some more chats, and I think we should continue to engage.
Yeah, no, I saw your comment about Andrew Tate, and yeah, I mean, even though everything Andrew Tate, a lot of things that Andrew Tate, kind of does suck about, very much, yeah, just like the feminization of men and such. I do. He said, just like... that he's speaking to men and that there's value in that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think the bar is really low when it comes to guys. Like if you're talking to men and trying to engage with them, you're probably going to be pretty popular because they don't feel like anyone's talking to them. And then I'm sorry, I'm going to read your last comment here.
I can pull them up too.
You guys are talking smack. I'm gonna debate all of it now. Just kidding. Hey, thanks so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
we love your opinions. I'm actually gonna pull up the chat on my phone
so I don't gotta lean in this next time. Yeah.
No well, unless you want to give them the zoom, show them the headshots.
No worries. So, I do think that it is worthwhile just to kind of summarize a little bit of our season if we're talking about what is a healthy man, like holistically this whole season. We've talked about physical health, mental health, spiritual health, social health. I think when it comes to mental health, I think a lot of guys, this is where we kind of get tripped up.
Yeah.
And we find that it's really difficult to ask for help or say that we're not okay. And I do think there's a lot of ways that you can be mentally healthy, developing positive routines, going to therapy, taking care of, your other aspects of your life to make sure that you're mentally healthy. It's all kind of related in a lot of ways. I feel like it can be difficult to take care of your mental health sometimes as a guy because it's frowned upon of, if you're taking care of yourself, you're not taking care of other people. You're supposed to be a provider and invincible in some ways.
I think that for me, for what I feel like is important to share in this conversation when we're talking about holistic health, we have a whole other hour where we also don't solve, what is the best things that you can do for your mental health that you can go listen to on YouTube, soon to be Spotify, but and wherever your other podcasts are sold.
We're still hoping to get on Apple Podcasts and Spotify someday.
But I think that the thing that I would like to impart, that I don't know if I genuinely don't recall whether I imparted well enough in our last conversation about it, is that I think that just giving young men and anybody that might be listening the radical permission to go outside of the societal norm when it comes to taking care of yourself and taking the rest that might not feel like you deserve or that you need, because our society lies about whether or not rest is something that is earned or is a right. And I would also want to give you the radical permission to behave in ways that are extraordinary to our society when it comes to the people around you that you care about, that you love, that you call friends, the guys that you game with or that you experience the outdoors with, you go through life with, whether they're your coworkers or your friends that you meet at the bar or what have you. I think our society often tells us not to go too far when checking in on that man that's struggling. I think our society tells us to allow men their dignity, heavy quotes, to suffer in silence or suffer in the way that they want to personally define. And I want to give out that permission and to speak out into existence that we build a better world by being more willing to let your buddies stay and talk about it after everybody else is gone.
Even if you don't know what to say.
Even if you don't know what to say.
Because I feel like the big barrier there is, if someone talked to me about, their wife dying, I just wouldn't know what to say. I wouldn't have anything to say. The point isn't what you would say. The point is that you listen to them.
Yeah.
That's really what therapy is honestly about.
Yeah, that's the secret. Just saved you a couple of years of education if you're
just listen.
If you're thinking about becoming a therapist and listening to this podcast.
And the other thing I wanted to mention on mental health before moving on is that sometimes guys need a sense of accomplishment, that they did something good. And I think that is okay if you feel like you need another goal that you want to go achieve.
Yeah.
Do we have more chats, Ben?
Just a few more from our friend Ghost Floof here. He's just teasing a bit. Well, I guess I'm assuming your gender, but
never assume the gender, Ben.
Ghost Floof shares a lot of the same women that tell society to stop telling men to stop crying are actually disgusted by vulnerable men the most.
Well, I do think that is an ongoing kind of issue that we don't really talk about how women police gender as well as men. We do think of like young boys as being the gender police growing up in elementary school, where if you remember, getting called gay or whatever, if you're, not having gender conforming behavior as a kid, that very much was, I think, an issue for many, millennial boys at least. But I do think that women also kind of police that in some kind of passive-aggressive ways. They'll go into the women's restroom and say, oh, are you going to ask him on a date? No, he's too femme. Yeah. It was a comment someone actually made about me once. So I think that there definitely is some policing there that women are having around gender that they don't necessarily engage with.
I think the other thing that's important to remember with this is, like, acknowledging that we all have our own experiences with dating and with gender identity and experiences around growing up, and what have you. And one thing that I want to always be a proponent of is remembering that men, we get to talk a lot about how men are not monolithic, and that there are many different facets of manhood and different ways to be like the hero in your own narrative and things like that. But also we should hold that same standard for women too. Women are not monolithic. There certainly are a lot of women that are raging against the machine of, progressive society as we move towards men being more allowed to share their emotions and things like that. And at the same time, there are women that are appreciating it and are championing true equality in spaces where gender inclusivity is focused upon. And so I don't want to throw, in
And
the same way that
I think that some men fall into the trap of this is women's fault.
yeah,
And I think that trap is really
it's a bad trap. Don't
that is
get
a
fall in
trap.
the trap.
It's very much a trap.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I do want to be mindful of time too, and talk about maybe like physical health a little bit. Just say we had our physical health episode. We talked about some men find value in working out, exercising, having a routine. They feel good about that. Going to the doctor, making sure you're eating 3 square meals a day, making sure that you're sleeping. That taking care of your physical health can very much be a way that a lot of people can access feelings of masculinity, and also you'll probably notice your mental health is going to improve if you are generally taking care of your body.
No notes. I think we talked a bit in our episode about modern culture today. A bit really kind of focuses on gym life, gym culture, gym bro culture. That's one of the more popular
celebrated masculinity.
Yeah, celebrated masculinity is a great way of putting that. And there are alternatives to that, and there are alternative understandings of physical health, and I think that if you want to hear more about physical health, go check out our other episode.
Okay, sounds good. Should I go through spiritual, social too?
Yeah.
You think?
Glad that you can join us from Japan, Ghost Floof. I'm not sure I understand your quote there, so I'm just gonna let you think about rewording that, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, no worries. So the spiritual health, I think, is another piece that we talked about. I did focus a little bit on finding the deeper meaning, as well as the third place kind of issue. I think we talked about the third place in the social episode as well. But the spiritual piece, I think, is sometimes it is finding a religion, and sometimes it's finding just like a bit higher purpose. Like volunteering can feel like that for some folks, and then for other folks that's just not how they feel.
I think that when we were first starting to talk about what are we going to do for this whole season, what are we going to do for the podcast, how do we break this apart, what subjects are we going to do, I think that spirituality is the hardest, it's the most intangible out of all of them, if you ask me.
It is.
When it comes to making sure that we're being inclusive, but also saying something real and with substance that actually is helpful for people to hear without, watering it down so much so that everyone can hear the same message and that nobody feels left out. At the end of the day, I think a true cutting way of saying it is, find something that works for you. Ask yourself, is internalized or externalized through spiritual means motivation something that I need, I feel a yearning for, and should pursue, and then adjust accordingly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's about finding the meaning making in your life and just kind of going with it, Yeah. I think if you want to check out more on spiritual health, take a look at our spiritual episode.
Yeah.
And then for the social piece, I think that a lot of men today really struggle with making connections in their adult life. There's kind of this assumption that in high school and college, if you do go to college, you're able to make those connections, and then those connections are supposed to be yours through your whole life. I have heard of people who move to, Minnesota, where we're located, and they find it difficult to break into some of those groups.
Yeah.
And so I do think that finding, as I mentioned earlier, the third place, whether that is a gym or a church or another group that you can be a part of, can definitely feel good, in that aspect. But we do know that people kind of need connection. I think that there is that idea of the alpha male out there who's so independent and doesn't need to be, around other people.
Yeah.
That's very much what he.
Are we calling that guy Sigma now?
We're calling that guy Sigma.
Yeah,
Sigma
that's probably. We're probably not calling that guy Sigma anymore soon.
Yeah, Sigma.
That's probably
is
on its
now,
way out.
has
too
too
kind
many,
of old.
Layers of insult at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think being able to make those social connections can be really important. And if you're struggling to put yourself out there, just give it a shot in whatever way you can. And if it's just going to a public place and just sitting there for a while and seeing if someone starts a conversation or seeing if you start a conversation, that's great. Then go back to the same place, same time next week, whether it's the gym or the library, and then see what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we hit all of the areas there?
That's all 4 of our other episodes this season that we're
Hey,
kinda
yo.
summarizing a little bit today.
And
So,
now you're a totally healthy man. You listen to that and
100%
that's
healthy.
100% health. Bill
no,
Health, clean.
and never ever gonna
Yeah.
need to have a tune-up ever again.
Yep.
So, Ben, do you have a poorly explained philosophy
Yeah.
segment for us?
I do.
Awesome.
And I think that this is a fun one for, a couple of guys that tend to think that they're quite witty. And so much so that, they decided to be 2 more white guys making a 2 white guys talk podcast.
2 white guys talking about a white guy
Yeah,
right now?
yeah.
Okay.
But you got 2 white guys about to talk about a white guy. Today I'm bringing for the class for us. I feel like holding it up like I'm at show and tell, but I don't have
I don't have the
pictures.
book.
I'm gonna have to get a picture or something for the next one. Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes is a philosopher that most people nowadays have heard his name in the form of Calvin and Hobbes comic sketches before they ever
Was he
encountered.
named after Thomas Hobbes?
He was.
Oh, I did not.
Yeah, John Calvin and Thomas Hobbes are the namesakes of Bill Watterson's characters, Calvin and Hobbes.
Amusing.
Calvin is the foundation of Calvinism, which is a spiritual theology and movement in Christianity post-Enlightenment that really I'm not going to go into. Thomas Hobbes was often at odds with him in some of his writings, but Thomas Hobbes wrote about the idea of the social contract. So just even the terminology or the fact that we talk about a social contract largely stems from the political philosophy that he espoused. So to start off a discussion of him today, and just to see what your reaction to this quote is, I brought for us something that he once wrote. For such is the nature of men, that howsoever they may acknowledge that many others to be more witty or more eloquent or more learned than they are, that yet they hardly ever believe that there be someone else who is as wise as themselves.
All right, Ben, do you want to try to break that down?
Yeah, I as a guy that grew up being praised not for his effort but for his grades and for his being in advanced classes and things like that, I think that I will name and claim the first part and the second part of the quote in its entirety. I think I am someone that got told he's smart a lot, and in a lot of ways feel like I've met so many other people that are smarter than me and all of that. Or as Thomas Hobbes put it, witty, eloquent, and more learned than me. And I think that I will, to self-disclose a bit, this quote hit me a bit of like, yeah, I do that. I can acknowledge that someone else knows more about something else than me. And deep inside myself, there's a little goblin that goes, but I'm better at picking. I'm better at deciding. I'm better at such and such other things. I'm wise.
Yeah.
Right?
I know this, but this person doesn't know that.
Yeah, and so put another way, Hobbes is attacking this notion that especially among people that are learned, which for the 1600s, England, he was writing for other people who were capable of reading, and so it was a conversation only among academics that he knew he was having. He was writing to other people that had also experienced a lifetime of this same thing, and I think he was lamenting that the pride, I would argue, is another way to put it, of being a man that for all the ways that one can recognize others to be better than oneself, I think that he goes on to share that it can be really harmful to not see the ways that others have wisdom that we can learn from, and that others have experiences that we haven't had.
It's almost like hubris.
Yeah,
In a way.
hubris, I think, is a good one.
Yeah, where you kind of this idea of I look at this person and I don't see the value of that which I can learn from them, only that I'm better than them.
Yeah, and I think 1600s philosophers probably also were having a lot of for lack of better term, dick measuring contests with each other about their essays and things.
I mean, I'm sure their essays were their dick measuring contests.
They
as
were.
opposed to our, what do you bench, kind of this year.
Yeah. Our chats say Dunning-Kruger effect, question mark. Seems like it stems from a lack of self-awareness over hubris, though. I think, yeah, that's a good point. I think that what Hobbes is, because you can point something out, but you don't. I think that there is inherently maybe some sort of, in the phrasing that he's using here, this chatter is got a point. Thomas Hobbes is saying it's probably a good idea to be aware of that, that we can do that, right? Inherently in the fact that he wrote it down. He thought this was a good enough idea to share it. He clearly thought, at least of himself. I always think it's so interesting to read writings from people and to try not to separate. Like, what do you suppose Thomas Hobbes thought about himself if he was really to write that?
We all have the Johari window, right? What I know, what others know, and then what's unknown to both of us, and then what's known to one, and then like the other, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that sometimes, we're gonna have those blind spots, and those blind spots are really inevitable.
Yeah.
And I think the best you can do is just try and be open to getting rid of the blind spots, and being willing to hear feedback and investigate that and take a look at that. And I think that is very much a measure of a good man, in my opinion at least, that you could take a look at that feedback, you can hear it, you can be honest about it and be like, okay, yep, I'm gonna look at that, and if that ends up being a thing, then I will make some changes, and if that ends up not mattering, then well, I guess I listened to it anyway.
Yeah. What do you think about Thomas Hobbes? What do you take to Thomas Hobbes? You asked me how I feel about it, and we went into all my interpretations and stuff, and some chats. But
yeah,
what do you take away from this?
I like the hubris thing. Really stuck out to me.
Yeah.
I think that we've talked about hubris from like ancient Greece. Like it's a very old concept. This idea that a man would become so proud that there's no way he could take feedback from anyone else, and he might think himself a king in somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think that hubris is very much a fallacy of man in a lot of ways, and of people broadly, that if you think that you can't be beaten, or you're so smart for something, it's just not necessarily true. And I think that we're all going to kind of fall into that trap sometimes, and it kind of feels difficult and negative. But I also think that there's very much like an area for growth there of, if you are in a blind spot and someone, who you trust is giving you kind of like this opportunity to get out of that blind spot, I think that really brings you closer in that like relationship, and it makes you better, And I think that there's a lot of, that's rich in meaning. Just, men, iron sharpening iron, I feel like is a phrase that I hear sometimes. That sometimes is a bit overused.
Biblical one. Yeah.
But, it can very much, refer to just like guys very much pushing each other to be better, and that is something good and
I would
constructive.
even, to take and mix that metaphor from what you're saying, I think, too, like, he's also expressing let yourself be ironed. Let yourself be sharpened.
Yeah.
Right?
Rather than being
just
like, no, I don't really want to be sharpened. Like, my sword is good, and you see the cracks in it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to share about Thomas Hobbes, or to talk a little bit about it, is the idea of the social contract. I think that, and it kind of flows into this, sometimes we highlight people that save the world. We started with the prostate cancer research at the beginning of the conversation here today, but I would be remiss to bring up Thomas Hobbes and not mention how radical it was in the 1600s in anglicized Europe to write at the lengths, especially that he did, against the church at the time. He didn't necessarily, and what's crazy is to go back in history, he wasn't even necessarily against religion or Christianity, and I think in a lot of ways it's demonstrable that Christians claim him as one of their own, but at the time he was writing really radical ideas about how morality for a human man was just known to be received from God, and so the Christian God of the Bible, King James Version specifically, right? And the readings and interpretations as allowed by the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church, depending on what part of Europe you're in. And he was writing about this idea that it stands to reason that a man is benefited by the rest of his society simply by contributing to society because it benefits him. In one's own personal best self-interest, it is best to be a model member of society, to care for your neighbors, to do all of these things. And he goes all the way down to the basal level of, if you do something heinous enough that the rest of the town will beat you to death, don't do that thing. That's not a good idea for you to do personally.
Generally bad.
And then all the way up to, if you can feed and clothe the family next door, the economy of your town continues to thrive. And your own town, your own children have a better future with a greater and more diverse group of citizens that are involved and capable of continuing to build a strong community for the grandchildren, great-grandchildren that you will never meet. That was his definition, and very succinctly and poorly explained, for the social contract. And I think if we're going to be men that are examining how to be our best selves, I think our inherent debt to society, that is something that I think a lot of men struggle with around their identity. I think it's wrapped up as well in these conversations that we're having online about masculinity and whether or not women think men should be this way or this way, and whether or not men think men should be this way and this way. A lot of this stems from am I contributing? Am I contributing in a way that is noticed by other people? Is the social contract going to pay its dividends for what I've paid into it? I think is a question that a lot of us are inherently asking. And ultimately, I would say we as men should be proponents of the social contract being a blanket that covers all of us. One of the most profound things is that in early anthropology, we discovered one of the oldest remains of human beings that we have is a man with clear repair markings on one of his legs. Evidence that at the time, before we invented agriculture, but after we invented stone, tools, and fire,
they did surgery.
We have proof that they did surgery, that they patched a guy up, a dude that probably could not walk and contribute to society enough to pay for his own meals ever, was kept alive. And there's something profound and deeply meaningful in the fact that as a human society, we can talk about that 44,000 years later. Right? And so I will leave with what I think is really fun, a game of did Jaden Smith or Thomas Hobbes say this? Okay. I often observe the absurdity of my dreams, but never dream of the absurdity of my own waking thoughts. Thomas Hobbes, you're right. Yeah.
Why are we talking about it if it's not Thomas Hobbes?
Yeah, exactly. But I just thought that was a fun one to share because that, as I mentioned before, some of the conversation for today might seem like some of that stuff like your friend's older brother with too many mushroom posters would say in the basement right before he talks about 9/11 conspiracy theories. But Thomas Hobbes, I just wanted to also point out, had some goofy ones in there that, it's a guy in the 1600s. He didn't get everything right. And I don't think anybody ever does.
No, I don't think so either. I also think that the social contract, Thomas Hobbes, is often what I think people think of when they think of his philosophy.
Yeah.
And, what you mentioned just brought up some things for me, especially the question, how do men benefit from social justice? Yeah. And, men are often seen as in the position of privilege. And if we're thinking about social justice, it's about bringing, kind of like those without privilege into a space of more privilege. Mm-hmm. And so I think that some men, especially white, straight cis men, are kind of in the place of, well, what's in it for me? Mm-hmm. Is kind of the attitude that you sort of get from that.
Yeah.
And I think that there are benefits to social justice for men. Men can go into whatever job they want. They probably get paid better if they're looking at, kind of like financial social justice.
Look at unions, right? Unions are a crazy example. Unequivocally, no beating around the bush about it. We didn't say it at the beginning of this podcast as concretely as we normally do. but you can disagree the shit out of me with this, but you're wrong factually.
Are we a pro-union podcast?
Yeah,
right
we're
now,
a pro-union podcast right now. Unions raise the wages of everyone involved in them, whether or not you join. They are the reason that you have weekends. They're the reason that we only have to work 40 hours a week in order to make the needs of our insurance. I'm not going to go too long because I could go forever. Unions are good. Unions are a form of the social contract.
We invite all opinions on this podcast.
Yes.
But, I think that it is important for us to have dialogue about, what truly is, there. And I do think that if we're wondering why, a lot of white cis men, aren't on the social justice train, I think that people are selfish creatures sometimes. And I think that is a hard thing to kind of look at in the mirror, and it makes me uncomfortable sometimes. But I think that, if we can succinctly explain, how men benefit from social justice, I think that we're really onto something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. To me, when I read like things online that I don't disagree or that I don't agree with, in men's spaces, where it's maybe it's somebody making a comment about how it's all women's fault and that they can't get it, maybe more incel-y type conversations and things. And maybe I don't agree with what the person has to say, but I'll say I can see and I can tell and I totally get why that person might see the internet as a place that shames them, and that looks down on them or that dismisses their concerns without actually approaching them. And at the same time, I feel like, to me, what I see there is someone that just simply doesn't understand that truly, that in so many ways, if you interacted more positively and stopped demanding that the social contract give you things that it's not giving you, and instead thought about what you could give to society, you wouldn't have these problems. And it's repeated over and over again in example after example of, one of the things that lack of self-identity, things like depression, anxiety, and lots of other things. We talk about depression. We think about just crying in the corner of a room. For a lot of young men, it becomes this feeling of aimlessness and hopelessness for what their future will be. And so then you get really anxious and scared of what is society going to give to me if it won't let me play the game the same way other people are. If I'm playing Monopoly and everybody else started halfway up the board, and society tells me that I should be thankful for the fact that I'm privileged to start on Go instead of having to still be digging for my pieces. And that guy's got a point, and he would find more benefit from simply rolling the dice.
And I will say that it's very complicated.
Yeah.
I think that this is a really good segue into our next topic,
yeah.
which is, what is the bad man?
Yeah.
And I feel like when I want to talk about men's work, I really want to talk about what can we do? What is the good thing to do? What is the right thing to do? Because when we talk about that, it's, clinically in research, if you reinforce a positive behavior, it's more likely to happen. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to punish, a bad behavior, it's actually a lot harder to get rid of than telling you what to do rather than what not to do.
Yep.
When you see a sign that says, do not walk off the path on this hiking trail. Yeah. You kind of want to walk off the path on the hiking trail, dog, don't you?
Yeah. It's why the fuck can I?
Yeah.
Whose path is this?
Very much that.
Yeah. Suddenly, I'm real aware of the history of property rights.
Yes. Yeah, that whole situation.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like, as a society, we're kind of in this place of talking about the incels, of talking about toxic masculinity, when not necessarily having a replacement on the positive end of this is what men should do in the larger zeitgeist. And I'm glad that this season we could talk about, what is a healthy man broadly. And I think that that's, very important. And I hope that more people can kind of continue that conversation. But I think that it's hard to not acknowledge like the what is a bad man kind of thing going on, because I do think that there's absolutely negativity in this world. I just started watching the series Evil on Netflix, which has been out for 3 years, and I don't know if anyone here has watched it, but there's some very disturbing things that happen there that are not demons, but are just people doing really messed up things that there are definitely bad things happening in the world. And I think that a villainous man, like that the Allstate ad, the "Are you in good hands?" and it's the guy who's like, I am your.
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. I'm the hurricane
I'm the
waiting to
hurricane
drop this
waiting to drop this
tree.
this evil guy, like that's all gendered right there, that
Yeah.
a man, a selfish man, a chaotic man would destroy things just because
Yeah.
he wants to. So I think that the bad man, and I think there's absolutely racially charged tones there too that could
Yeah.
very much apply. Is something that we really should examine,
Yeah.
and I think pick apart and understand, and then also go, no, I think we need to talk about what's a positive male role model, and how can we have that representation in our media as well.
Yeah. Want to acknowledge in the chat. Thanks for joining us today, Ghost Floof. Enjoy
Yeah,
the
love your
enjoy the rest of the
engagement.
day. Thanks for the chats. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll see you around. He just said he was heading out.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I think that the question, we can talk a lot about what makes a good man, but I think that the dangerous or maybe spicy thing is like when you start to define what is a bad man, you start to other some people, and so
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's real. That's real.
I'm curious how you want to navigate that. I think that one thing that you've got written down here, and I think I'll open after I scare you that we're gonna other some people on our podcast.
Well, I think
But,
that you're right about that, because there are definitely different perspectives on good and bad man, on who is the bad man, and you
Yeah.
can go on.
Yeah. Actually, ironically, Thomas Hobbes. We were talking about a quote before the podcast started. On Thomas Hobbes didn't really think that individuals should be the ones that decide what is a sin or what is good or evil, because obviously, if somebody steals something at the time, they didn't think it was bad enough for them to not do it.
Yeah.
So should they really be their own? Should each individual Christian, was his argument, be their own interpreter of what God's morality is, or should we all just agree maybe we should or shouldn't do things? So his argument was for a system of laws, and he actually argued that there should be a single sovereign. Thomas Hobbes actually thought that there should be like a God king that ran everything.
That is absolutely what
sing-
Thomas Hobbes was standing for.
Yeah,
and I
singular,
know that, and
singular
That's
government
why the Christians
thing.
have claimed him.
Yeah, they super love the idea of that super singular God King thing,
Yes.
which also might bring us Warhammer 40k. So if we could all be Space Marines by electing a God King, God Emperor of mankind, it could be that's a joke. But
Then I just
could
think
be a
that I'm
win-win.
going to not elect a God Emperor.
Yeah, you're not gonna vote for God Emperors.
No.
Okay, me neither. I guess. If you won't, I won't. But
I'm intrigued by the idea of who is the bad man.
Yeah.
Because when you said we're going to other some people, there are definitely different perspectives on who is the bad man.
yeah,
I think that there is a half of the world that probably looks at the extremely masculine, rides motorcycles, goes to the gym, and someone would assume this person beats their wife, they beat
Yeah.
their children, they yell at other people at work.
that's not the
They're-
demographic
they're-
of people that I think about when you bring up domestic violence.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
But-
I don't know.
But go ahead.
I think that this is a caricature that some people are going to
Yeah.
say this is, likely a bad man.
Yeah,
But then I think that
I see what you're saying.
there is a
yeah.
section of society that actually would say that the bad man is the very effeminate man who can't control his feelings,
Yeah.
who's just out of control, who takes time off work because he has PTSD.
Yeah,
Things like that is what the other side of society,
Yeah.
I think, would say is a bad man. And so people are going to be disagreeing on what a bad man is.
Yeah.
Now, will I tell you that if you are beating your wife, you are bad?
Yeah.
I mean,
don't beat your wife.
That's a bad thing to
Yeah,
do.
don't shy away from that. You
I'm
can
not
you
gonna-
can lean right in.
I'm
You
not
can
gonna-
lean right in.
I'm not
Don't
gonna-
beat your wife.
I'm not going to fundamental
Yeah.
attribution bias and
Yeah.
say, like, because you did a bad thing once, you're bad forever. But,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes.
So just don't beat your wife. It's bad.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I'd also say, we can fundamental attribution bias play a little bit. Yeah, there are other things that are less egregious that I won't think that you're a shitty person
Yeah.
for the rest of your life. It's going to take longer and more effort to undo some of those things. Yeah, for sure.
anyway.
I'm maybe engaging in a little bit of what people might call toxic masculinity at the moment. Actually,
Really?
I think that I would argue that I am. I specifically saw a target that I saw as fair play to other, and I jumped on it when you mentioned it. But that allows me to segue here. You wrote it down in the list for our things that we might want to talk about. So I'll open that can of worms with theoretically 5 minutes left in the podcast, but who cares? We can go as long as we want.
We're good.
We control time here.
I have a planet too.
Oh, there you go. Is the terminology and the phrasing toxic masculinity serving us? Is it still serving us?
Yeah.
Is the question that I ask.
I think that when people hear toxic masculinity, they go, masculinity is toxic, and I think that people don't like to hear that. And I think that we would be better served by having a more positive term that just is kind of like, and I don't know if it's, heroic masculinity, positive masculinity, whatever it is, I don't mind. But I think that we need to have some kind of term, almost like feminism, to just say we are elevating men, not above women, but men are working on themselves, and we're getting better, and we're doing cooler things than we did yesterday.
Yeah.
Which I think that we are doing cooler things than we did yesterday. But I think that there's kind of this assumption that you're either a traditional and toxic man or you're not, and it's just more complicated than that.
I think though I'm gonna bite back at that a little bit too though. To me, these are just the opinions of just this half of the podcast at the moment. I think I'm just gonna start with that. I don't know. Sometimes I groan and roll my eyes a little bit. I'll admit, I groan and roll my eyes a little bit at the people that say, when you say toxic masculinity, some people might hear that masculinity is toxic. And sometimes I really don't want to engage with that rhetoric, because I think, to me, it feels, I'm trying to think of the polite ways to put it.
Dismissive of the hurt that men do?
Yeah, it feels intentionally reductivist, and I legitimately wonder, I'm just gonna say it, I wonder, are you actually that stupid, or are you being facetious so that anyone? I'll give you this. This is how I think when people start to go on too much about toxic masculinity might mean that all masculinity is toxic. I genuinely question, are you that dumb, or are you being facetious? Because my first two interpretations of that line of rhetoric generally aren't kind, because I'm not concerned with whether or not my masculinity is toxic. I can acknowledge that like some parts of it can be toxic. Yeah, it's probably problematic that I espouse to be willing and capable of violence under certain conditions, and that might not be the same as other people within the social contract. That's probably toxic, right? And that doesn't harm my identity. That doesn't make me feel like I'm a bad person. And I don't feel like someone is attacking all of masculinity when they're talking about toxic masculinity. It's like one of those I can separate that a part of the plane is not the whole plane, right? Like the wing doesn't make the whole thing fly. You need two wings and a whole wing. And if you are telling me that we need to change the designs of the wing on the airplane we're working on, I'm not just going to say, well, fuck you. If you don't like my wings, you don't like my airplane. We're doing submarines only from now on.
Yeah, and to be clear, Ben, I'm in the place of, I think that the term toxic masculinity is fine. I think that it describes a man who is so self-reliant that it is causing him harm. Almost like in a clinical sense.
Sure.
Or, is so in
or
disregard.
Fragile. So fragile that it's
so in
causing harm to
disregard
himself
for
or
other
others.
people's well-being
Yep.
that it's causing them harm.
Yep.
I think that sometimes the general public is, just they need simpler terms.
Yeah, well,
And
that's
think-
what I'm saying is,
yeah.
from my anecdotal experience, it is not the majority of people that are learned and educated in gender topics and things that think that people are shaming all men immediately and in totality by talking about toxic masculinity. It seems to only be people that are either willfully uninformed or insecure in their own masculinity in such a way that they need it to not be true that everybody hates masculinity, or they need it to be true that everybody hates masculinity so they can continue their identity of being persecuted or something like that. And I just like I'm gonna do some what I would argue is healthy, positive modeling, healthy and positive masculinity. My masculinity doesn't let itself be harmed by that.
I think that if you don't let people telling you what to do as a man bother you, whether it's about toxic masculinity or whatever, as long as you're not beating your wife like we talked about earlier, you're probably gonna be doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So you got to know who your idols are.
Let me also just say, it's terrible that that's our bare minimum, and it's not our only bare minimum here.
It's not the only one. But
look where we are one would think in 2025 that we could have, look back at the retrofuturism of like the 40s and 50s. We really would have been, on Mars by now and shit. But instead, we're still holding down this bar that is so low as to just like be a decent guy, be willing to take feedback sometimes, and like don't beat your wife. Like, that's really, like, all you gotta do. And it's the truth, though. And I think it's been a simple truth because, honestly, man hasn't changed all that much since we started getting together and farming the land and things around us.
I think that we just need to examine, as a society, how are we socializing boys? And asking that question is really important. Should we finish up for the day?
Yeah, I would say so. What conclusions do you have? I just went on a rant about toxic masculinity, so
it's okay. I'm glad that we can have an intelligent discussion and disagree sometimes. This season we've talked about how to be a healthy man in a lot of different ways, and I think that we touched on a lot of different topics. What's sticking to me from today is, remembering that, who's deciding what is a good man. A lot of times it's your personal ideals and your idols that is forming that for you. That Thomas Hobbes said some cool things before, and then also this question of men in social justice. I think that this is a question that I think we'll be coming back to on this podcast quite a bit. But how do we fit in? How do we deal with the terms of toxic masculinity? And how do we actually get better? Because that is what we want to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think my big takeaway is one of the things I wrote down was you said the words heroic masculinity, and that's just one of those that I think we're going to talk about that probably afterwards and maybe at some point in the future, because I think that one of the things that struck me was how important I think it is, like you said, that we can label all sorts of negative things all we want, but where are the positive things? And I think that's one of those things that, not to go on too far of an aside, but I recently heard about it was on NPR, about a campaign to change the flag in Mississippi, and regardless of what side you are on that and what have you, the net result of what's happened is that an unofficial flag for the state ended up outselling the state's official flag for a number of years, because for a time the political messaging around we should change our state's flag was shame, which made people clutch tighter. And what this person who invented the new flag of Mississippi, that's their current flag today, owes her success to, she says, is the fact that her messaging changed from take down a bad flag that people were debating.
Put up a new flag.
It was to put up a new flag that shows a beautiful symbol, a modern symbol.
That is the best example I have ever heard of that concept that I was just talking about.
There you go. Well, I'm glad that we can mind meld sometimes.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Thanks for the chatters that we had in chat today.
Yeah.
We'll most likely see you in a couple of weeks with a whole new series, whole new set of topics, and hopefully
we're going to spend a little bit of time soon to get on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We've been threatening to do that for a while, but I'm hoping to spend some time and do that in the next couple weeks too.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
See you guys next time.
Looking
Be good
forward
to each other.